Well, greetings all. We are live, and as promised today, we're going to be way more practical. We're still going to be in the realm of media, and news, and a little bit of current events. But after having that marathon of a show yesterday, and by the way, for those tuning into the live stream today, there's a little hiccup in the schedule now. I never intended yesterday's show to go as long as it did, almost 3 hours. Almost 3 hours. It's insane. It was a combination of things. It was how much I put on the agenda, how much was going on, how much happened over the weekend, and how much was going on that you didn't know about in the background. So there was a lot in the background. And what that means is today for the audio show, we will have the second half of yesterday's show. And then that means this live stream will go out on the audio feed on Wednesday. So those of you that maybe catch part of one and part of the other, that's what's going to happen. And that's good because at the most, we'll have one rewind this week for the audio side. Of course, rewinds don't go out on the video side. With some of the tools that StreamYard's making available, though, I may be able to start doing that in the future. That'd be kind of cool. You'll think it's live, but it's actually Memorex, right? Anyway, so what are we going to talk about today? We're talking about mental sovereignty today. And this is a subject I have covered before. I'm actually using a lot of the notes that I used the last time, but it will be with today's modern updates, I guess. It'll be slightly different. And the reason is the last time I covered this, no one even knew what the word COVID meant. No one had ever heard it before. I guess unless you were inside the world of science or something like that. But the world was largely oblivious to the concept of what the government would do in the middle of a scamdemic. So everything that's in today's episode is kind of, well, it's kind of had a big old dose of steroids in the butt. And it's a good time to revisit it. And I know this is an informed audience, and a lot of you guys are going to be like, I don't know if I need this one. I'm pretty mentally sovereign. I've talked about you guys. I've talked to you guys about this many times in many different things, whether it's like going back to the basics of storing food, the very basics of basic backyard gardening, etc., the basics of EDC or what have you. We call all of these things fundamentals. And what I remember being, an athlete when I was young, I'm talking like middle school, high school age, and being a soldier for a number of years after I got out of school, that there were two times that you did fundamentals. One was when you screwed up. Okay, so you screwed up the advanced. Let's go back and redo the fundamentals, man. Right. But the other time was if you had good leadership, just randomly. So nobody did anything wrong, but today we're going to go back to the basic drills and we're going to work on fundamentals. And the reason is that your fundamentals in any discipline are the foundation upon which everything else is built. And if you ask an architect, how can you know without seeing blueprints how big a building is going to be before they actually start erecting the building? He'll say, show me the hole in the ground and the foundation you're going to build. And I'll tell you how many stories the building is going to be. And if he's wrong, if he says, hey, this is going to be a 10-story building and somebody puts 20 stories on it, it comes down, right? And so it makes sense when you're not dealing with basically a static load is what a building is. You put the building there, and yeah, people put stuff in it all, but the weight of stuff going and people going in and out of a building, that's the dynamic load, is not really that significant. I guess wind shear on a building, but overall you're designing for the static load of the building. A dynamic load means that it changes, right? So if you have a big tank full of water, it has pressure on the sides and that water drops by half and fills back up. That's a significantly dynamic load. Well, when it comes to the foundation that is your mental sovereignty, it is an incredibly dynamic load because there's a constant war on to control where you think, and how you feel. And none of us are immune to the tools that they use. I'll put it to you this way. If you're a cop, you fully well know how to do interrogation techniques where like you've separated two people. And you're like, he's probably over there rolling over on you right now and telling us everything he knows. It would be better if you worked with me. I mean, I bet this is what he did. Like he told you were special. He was the only one you could trust. Like they play the same game over and over. So you'd think that somebody that was a cop, if they ended up on that side of an investigation, would be really informed as to what's going on and know exactly how they're being manipulated. And they will. And it'll still work sometimes. It'll still work sometimes because they know that other person may indeed roll over. And they know that the person that it actually might work better if they know, because they know the person that does talk first might get a deal, especially if there's no way out of it in the first place, but they can make a case better for the state, right? So this manipulation method of interrogation, well, if they know and it still works on them, how do you think it is with you, even though you know? So we're going to work on fundamentals today. And what I want to start out with the fundamentals is something, when I say this, nobody's going to be like, oh, crap, Jack just dropped a bomb on me. I can't believe he said that. I never thought of it before. But the news isn't news. It's programming. It's programming. Now, I think everybody out there is nodding their head going, yeah, it's programming. We all knew it was programming. Shit, no big deal, Jack, big deal. But I actually want you to think about the word programming. We take words that we use the same word in two different situations and we forget the link. So when we say network programming, media programming, we tend to think of that's just the word we use to describe setting the schedule, deciding which shows to run and where, what kind of shows, what they're going to be about. Sitcoms here, hard-hitting news there, what have you. It's just a word. It's not just a word. If I don't say media, or I don't say news, or I don't say network, if the only word I give you is programming, probably the first thing you see is some guy behind a computer laying down code. Programming, right? I want to make this computer capable of doing these things. I want to create a software package or an app that when the people are using it, interact with it, it does things the way I want them done. It funnels them through a process. It allows them to design something, whatever it is. I mean, not all software is malicious, right? We all use software every day. I'm using a cloud software called StreamYard right now to talk to you. It's not a malicious thing, but somebody had to program it to do what it does. And once it's programmed, it is going to act a certain way. Now, if you're trying to program a human mind, you're dealing with a dynamic load. So it's not completely predictable. Different humans will react different ways, but you don't care if you're the one behind the programming that different people will act different ways, or that some small minority will see right through your bullshit and recognize your pattern. You don't care about that at all. All you care about is the macro. If I can move 60, 70, 80% of the population in a direction, it's like dropping a giant boulder into a body of water. That wave is unstoppable now. It's going to go all the way across and crash into the opposite shore. And I know before I push the boulder off the cliff exactly how big the wave is going to be. I know exactly what it's going to do. And I know exactly what kind of damage or impact it's going to cause on the other side. There was a famous Roman philosopher or emperor or both. I don't remember. I'll dig it up, maybe add it to the show notes. But the paraphrase would be that when you get it right, when you agitate the crowd, the reaction has a marvelous or beautiful resemblance to the sea. So even back, 2,000 years ago or so, politicians knew this, that they could just make this little movement basically with their hand and basically create this tiny wave that would just grow and grow and grow and ripple and turn into a tidal wave and accomplish what they wanted on the other side. And if 20 or 30% of the people were running around going, the emperor has no clothes, even if the emperor was naked, everybody would say, shut up, you're a conspiracy theorist. It'd be like a cow in line to get to the slaughterhouse going, Bill, Betty, I'm telling you, if we go in that door, they're going to kill us and eat us. And they're like, shut up, Frank. Take your tinfoil hat off, you idiot. Right? And they know this is going to happen. They know that there's a critical mass in any psyop, in any control, that if we get over a certain number, a certain percent, and that percent is also a dynamic load. It's not a static load. It's not like the number 70. Some things you can push with a minority. Once you get the right minority revved up the right way, if they have a certain amount of power, you can push it through and it'll build over time. Some things you got to get up to that 60 percentile out of the gate to make it work. Right? And they know this. So every piece of information the media gives you, everything, I mean everything you see that comes through your screens, unless it's true independent journalism, And then it probably still applies. It's maybe not just, it's not coordinated. That's the difference between independent journalism and mainstream media. There's just as much hype in independent journalism. There's just as much agenda. There's just as much yellow. All of it happens. But since it's not coordinated, you get a better view of the truth from independent journalists, especially if you listen to like 6 of them that don't like each other. That's probably the best thing that you could do. If they're actual journalists do research. Actual journalists don't claim that they know a thing unless they confirm it from 2 sources, etc. Okay, so if you take that into account, then you can trust the independent journalists more. But even they will come down in these 3 places. These are only 3 pieces of information designed to do one of these 3 things. 1, get ratings. If something will make you tune in, if something will make you share it, if something will make you talk about it, if something will make you argue with your brother about it, if anything will cause you to give your attention to the screen, they'll put it on the screen, even if it doesn't perfectly match their particular desires. So they'll do anything for ratings. They'll talk about shit they hate for ratings. But then this next thing is to sell an agenda. So even when it doesn't directly sell their agenda, if it works for ratings, they can use it to sell their agenda. So most things are all 3 of these, but it's going to be at least one of the 3 and really nothing else. So they want to sell you an agenda. So even when they have to report something they'd prefer not to report, they're going to figure out an angle to steer it with by taking other peripheral information and stacking it on top of it that may or may not be true to get you to move in the direction of their agenda. And they do not seek to go, hey, I'll tell you what. What we need is you to 100% buy into our agenda. All they seek when selling an agenda is to move you 1 degree in the direction of their agenda. And this is something the left is way better at than the right. The left is way better at incrementally selling their agenda. Now, I'm not saying it's a good thing to do. I'm not saying the left is right or correct. I'm saying the left is better at this manipulation technique. They're more patient. They're more patient with selling their agenda. And they're more ruthless in doing it as well. The left is quicker to use violence, but the right is better at violence when they use it. That's a way to think of this. But to sell an agenda. Next, and this is how you get the ratings and the agenda. Okay? You create an emotional reaction. So every piece of media you see is done to get ratings, create an emotional reaction, and sell an agenda. Period. And guys, if you're asking me questions you want me to actually comment on, remember all caps, at least the first couple words, and I will mark them and get to them at the end. But that's it. And then what you have to understand on top of this, and I know many of you know this, but 90% of media in our country, 90%, it's probably higher now, there's been more consolidation, is owned by 6 corporations. So 6 corporations control 90% of what comes through your screen. And that is if we count the internet screen. You're watching me right now. None of those corporations control me. But I'm not on TV, am I? If we go to the TV screen, it's 99% of the information that comes through that screen is controlled by 6 companies. 6 companies control almost everything that the American people see. And then you have your outlier in Fox Media supposedly taking the other side. You have to have a contrarian in there somewhere. But in the end, if you look at the emotional response, the ploys to get ratings, and the agenda actually being sold, there's really no difference in Fox from MSNBC. They sell the agenda differently. If you watched Fox News through COVID, you might have been less frightened by the TV, but you got the same message. Listen to my experts, do as you're told, socially distance, close down your business, wear your stupid mask. Now, eventually they became more anti-mask, but in the beginning, I remember talking heads like Hannity going, I'm okay if they reopen the baseball games and you go in and you have your mask and you lift it up and you take a sip and you stupid ass stooge. They sold you the same agenda. They're selling you the same agenda on the Ukraine war. Fox News may be a little more like, hey, maybe we actually have a role in this, but hey, we need to spend all the billions. We need to do everything. Putin's crazy. And you can keep going through it. And the macro of the issue other than which clown you vote for. The agenda is the same across the board. It's just more blatant in certain directions on different sides. They all want the same thing. One thing you have to know, especially right now, when you look at what's coming and what's happening, everything they crash, they buy. Everything they suppress in price, they buy. So, like right now, I've got a thing up on the screen for those of you that want to comment. I want to know what your biggest concerns are in our near future. What are the things you're most worried about happening between now and the end of summer 2022? Go ahead and let me know in the comments there. But I'm going to comment on the one that I'm paying attention to the most right now. And that is diesel fuel. Diesel fuel. Paul Wheaton would be proud. I actually have a little jumper spider on my camera right up there checking me out. It'd be cool if you would come over here and go over the lens. Anyway, I'm most concerned. Okay, Tom says food. All right. And Tom says food and Troy says oil. And I'm concerned about both in a way. Currency devaluation is what James says. Losing the money I finally have, Jim Jen says. Further economic collapse. Got a bunch of stuff. Food supply, meat availability, and regulation. I'm reading everybody as they come in. Fuel from K-Bonk took the words from my fingers. So fuel is what I'm worried about. But I'm worried about a specific fuel right now. And that specific fuel is what we call diesel, right? So all those big trucks that take all the shit, long haul across our highways, they all burn diesel. I had this conversation with my wife last night when I was talking about it. I like this one, though. RDB, Pawnee says squash bugs. That's a guy with his priorities right, folks, okay? Now, but we do have to pay attention to this. Now, if you're worried about squash bugs, you might be a little less concerned. But my wife's like, so diesel, that's like the big trucks? I'm like, all the big trucks. Except the few electric semis that are out there now. There's very few of them, really. And we won't go down that rabbit hole. We don't need to start kicking that or anything. Just the reality is right now, your shit gets to you because of diesel trucks. And the mainstream media is currently using emotion to get ratings and to sell an agenda and telling you diesel fuel is too expensive. And it's going to make everything else more expensive, which is true. Like, it's not a lie in of itself. And even the leftist propagandist MSNBC and CNN are saying this now. So what they're talking about is the front side of the problem. When the media, in my experience with pattern recognition, when the media starts to discuss the front side of a problem that's been visible for 6 months, you're about 4 to 6 weeks away from the backside of the problem. So what does that look like? Okay, here we go. Right now, diesel reserves are about 3 days. Meaning you disrupt the supply of diesel fuel, you have 3 days of fuel. And people would say that's normal. No, it's not. Because when I say reserves, I don't mean right there available. I mean through the entire pipeline from the refinery and storage at the refinery all the way to the pump. We have about 3 days, especially in the Northeast and Eastern United States, of diesel fuel. And it's so not normal that there's never been a time in modern history where reserves have been as low as they are. And it is not going to get any better. And we are hitting peak season with ultra low reserves. So while the media is telling you prices are going to go up, I'm going to tell you that it's not just prices going up. There will be trucks that are supposed to roll that will not roll. Remember the trucker strike was going to shut everything down, and they kind of deflated that balloon by lifting all the COVID restrictions after Canada before the U.S. truckers had a time to make a point, and it did exactly what I said it could do. It completely sucked the air out of the movement. But now, now we'll create our own trucker shortage. This has been created. They did this. It's about to kick you square in the ass. And again, everything they crash, they buy. They crashed the stock market. They pumped a bunch of liquidity. They borrowed the liquidity against nothing, and they invested in the stock market heavily at the beginning of the COVIDs. They made a fortune. Most people couldn't do it. They lost their money. They had no reserve capital to go in at the bottom of the market. They created an exodus of people, big time exodus of people moving all around the country. This created a surplus of people moving into a lot of cities and towns where things weren't totally crazy. And what happened? BlackRock front-ended all of the movement, bought up all the rental properties, sight unseen for above market value, and they took over real estate throughout all the major growing, thriving markets in the United States. First you crash it, then you buy it. And if you can borrow money at almost no interest, unlimited, you live for crashes. If you don't see the agenda, you can't disconnect from it. So I'm telling you what's happening here. They destroyed small business, and then they pushed the money into large corporations. So effectively, they bought out the small companies, the brick and mortar businesses, the 3, 4, 5 generation old small businesses throughout Manhattan, for instance. Places that had been there forever, gone, disintegrated, disappeared. They bought them out the way, if you ever saw the episode of The Simpsons, where Homer creates a tech company and Bill Gates shows up to buy them out, they bought them out that way. If you haven't seen it, Gates and his goons show up, and Homer's like, it's payday, and they just smash all his shit and leave. He said, buy them out, boys, right? With his moves and his little geek voice. They bought out those guys that way, but BlackRock bought out the property by actually buying it. What do you think they're going to buy now? They came down on the farmers. The farmers were burning their fields. They were killing their animals. What did they buy? They bought farmland. So now they're going to push diesel to the point where truckers not only can't afford to roll their trucks, they can't even get diesel to roll their trucks. And what is that going to do to trucking companies, mid-sized trucking companies, big trucking companies? It's going to put them into really tough times. What do you think they're going to do then? They're going to buy the trucking companies. You'll see major announcements of huge mega corporations saving the trucking industry and shit like that by the end of summer. They're buying the food processing industry out. Everything they crash, everything they damage, they buy. One more time, and we're going to move on. Everything they crash, they buy. Back to understanding how controlled all the information you receive is. Do you know? Oh, yeah, BlackRock just bought Ancestry, baby. You know what Ancestry has? Because people are stupid. The largest collection of human DNA on the planet. Yay. BlackRock wants your DNA. What is that? You think they bought it because they think it's really cool to have a genealogy website? Do you think that's the business that BlackRock's in, guys? Do you? Do you really? I don't think so. Yeah, BlackRock bought Ancestry. But in that fact that 6 companies control almost all the media you see, there's 237 top executives that have basically the power to say, yes, we're doing this. No, we're not. Inside those 6 companies, 237 top executives can literally throw toggle switches and control the complete agenda of the media. 237 people. And they work in cooperation versus in competition. Conversely, you know how many members of Congress we have, Senate and House together? Last time I did a count was 535 members. So the United States Congress, Senate and House combined is 530 some odd people. And they control your country. And they are adversarial relationships with each other. They have their own agendas. Now, their agendas are fueled by the same oligarchs. But you can see how it takes time. That's why there's a term. It'll take an act of Congress to get this done, right? But you have half the number of people working cooperatively to the same agenda with control of over 90% of your media. Why do you think we lose so often? Why do you think people are so easy to control? Think about how much influence that is. Would you rather be a senator or control one of the 6 media companies, or be one of the 237 top executives in the media companies with the power to control what people see? If you wanted power, if you wanted real power, would you rather be one of 100 in the Senate and have to deal with the House on the other side? Because senators have a lot more power than a congressman. Would you rather be a senator, one of 100, or a media executive, one of 237? Which one do you think you could get more shit done with? What do you think? Would you rather control the Congress as lobbyists or control 237 media executives with your advertising money if you wanted to control people? Now, think about your biggest media with the most influence. That's the shit that masquerades as news. Who's their biggest advertisers? Turn on CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News. What is the one industry that you see advertising more than anybody else? You know, they have catchy jingles. Usually they're remixes of 80s or 90s pop songs, and they have happy people dancing in the fields, even though they have stage 3 metastatic breast cancer. Yeah. The pharmaceutical industry. So the pharmaceutical industry alone exerts an undue amount of influence on those 237 top executives. And then we have to trust my science. Now, this is like, you just have to really think about this for just a couple seconds. And then you realize there is nothing in the media you can trust. Doesn't mean it's all fake. It means you can't trust it. It's not something that you can ever trust. So, in summary, the news is rigged. And I want to pseudo quote the famous Russian proverb. And the reason this Russian proverb is so famous is because it was once used by Ronald Reagan in negotiating with the Russians. Reagan spoke this quote, and it caused Gorbachev, I think it was Gorbachev, to laugh because he knew it. It was a very, common quote in Russian: trust but verify. When it comes to the media, that's not good enough. Never trust, always verify. Never trust the media. Never trust a word that comes out of anybody in the media's mouth, and that includes me. Everything I say, if you have 1% inkling that I am lying to you or wrong or misunderstanding the situation myself, I encourage you to verify it. And if you decide, even if you bring me the information and I say, nope, I've done the research, here's why you're wrong, and you still don't believe me, I suggest that you go on with your life with your view as your guiding light, because maybe it is different for both of us because of where we sit prospectively on what should be done in response to it. I'm one of the few people that will tell you that, though. Most will say, you can trust me. And the first thing you should do when somebody says, trust me, don't trust that motherfucker. Seriously, guys, please don't do it. That's what everybody you can't trust says. Trust me. That spider's just hanging out, man. I wish he's on the camera, so I can't show you. He's just cool as crap. Hey, buddy. Anyway, so next up, the key to having the capacity for independent thinking. This is what you need to do for yourself. These are 5 steps I have for you. And if you don't do these 5 things, you're not building that solid foundation. And all of this emotional, illogical crap will get into you. When you find yourself completely outraged at the other side, the agenda is still being pushed forward. It doesn't matter which boot you're riding when the Giants marching forward, the left or the right foot, you're going in the same direction. So number 1, you need information fasting. Hey, John, thanks for the super chat, man. Thanks for the $5, dude. You need information fasting. And that includes me. Shut off all media for a week here and there. Just let go. Don't listen to shit. Or if you're going to listen to me, pick my shows where I talk about gardening or something. So it's not any current events. You need information fasting, even from trusted sources. Because if you don't, your mind never relaxes. And you stay in a constant state of stress, so you're subject to manipulation, because any creature will move away from stress. But they will also seek stress if they get a dopamine hit, and then they get really easy to manipulate. If I take a rat, put it in a box, and I just physically stress it, but I don't actually hurt it for long enough, it will literally die. It'll eventually succumb to a heart attack. It'll stop eating. It'll go to malnutrition. Something will happen to it. It will die, right? It will die. And Dowdy says, there you go, Spiro, buy a gallon of gas. I think I can buy a gallon and a half of gas here with $5. Anyway, you have to take information fast. Number 2, I want you to take daily walks. And I don't care when, and I don't care how you make time for it. I just care that. The human being is bipedal. We're literally made to walk. And if you think back to our hunter-gatherer days, there was never a day where your hunter-gatherers what we're going to do today? We're going to sit around and watch the fire burn. Fire was the gathering point. The fire in primitive man was the TV of the time, where we told stories and sang songs and hung out and drank some fermented berry juice even before we knew what it was and got a little bit drunk, or maybe did a little peyote or whatever and had a vision quest and just talked about the days, and the women talked about it literally is the same gathering point. But your primitive ancestors never sat on their ass all day long, day after day. And if you don't take walks and you work in an office job, you sit in a chair like I am doing right now, you think, well, even my TV time is limited. Maybe it's only a couple hours, or maybe my sitting around and talking to my wife on my ass time is limited, or whatever it is, where you're in a seated position. But it's not, because you're coming from an office job, or if you're driving, I'm driving, you're sitting. You're not walking. Every day you need to walk. 10, 15 minutes minimum. Longer is better, but 10, 15 minutes will change your life. But this is the key. When you're walking, focus on your breathing. Develop a slow and steady, all the way in, all the way out breathing cadence. I'm tricking you into a form of meditation here. It's all you have to do. And so figure out like how many steps in and then how many steps out. Maybe it's 3 steps in and 3 steps out, or it's 2 steps in and 2 steps out with the breath. Focus on your breathing while you do it. And the reason you'll do that, if you don't, you'll find yourself power walking, which is not bad in of itself, but you'll be thinking, dadgone crazy ass liberal nut job. This doesn't help you. It's not just the physical, it's the mental. Because when your ancestor got up and was going to walk through the forest because, hey, the place that we spear this thing is over, like where we spear these fish or collect these oysters is over here. And on his way there, he wasn't thinking about his mother-in-law or what the president or the king was doing or whatever. He was thinking, hey, I hope there's lots of mussels there today, or I hope there's fish to spear, or I hope there's a deer there. I hope my traps are full of food. And he walked with anticipation of the only thing that mattered at that point, feeding his people and himself and his family. And then when he got there, as he obtained it, then his need for, basically it's a power system. He's exerted his power. Okay. And so that has been fulfilled. He had been challenged to a thing. He obtained the thing. He could chill. And then all he's thinking is, I'm bringing this stuff back to my people. And at that point, you're in total chill mode. Well, most of us don't have that anymore. Thanks, Green Country Acres, for another $5 super chat. Now I can afford 3 gallons of gas. Thanks, guys. Yeah, that's how it works, right? And you don't have that anymore. But if you focus on your breathing, it requires you to give your attention to something you normally never pay attention to. We walk around. Breathing is an involuntary action. Breathing is an involuntary. That's kind of funny if you think about it. Breathing is involuntary. Breathing is an involuntary action. You will breathe. You fall asleep, you breathe. If it was a voluntary action, falling asleep would be dying. Okay? So by focusing on a thing that's normally not focused on, we pull our mind from all this distraction. And all of a sudden in it, you'll find yourself drifting. And here's my rule. If you drift from paying attention to your breathing, and you start to think about something productive and proactive that's good for you and isolated inside the things you actually control, go with it. If you drift off of that and start thinking about a TV show or something your boss said or a fight you had, go back to your breathing. That's all you have to do. And if you do that for 15 minutes a day, you'll radically change your life and you'll be able to fend off this shit so much better because you'll be living the way a human being is supposed to live. Next, contemplate flavors, colors, something, anything. When you're taking a walk, stop in a place and look at the trees and say to yourself, were those trees as leafed out, or were the leaves beginning to turn color if we're later in the year? Or take some situational awareness in that's passive. So I always talk about situational awareness when you're driving down the road. Notice things that might tell you a neighborhood's going downhill. That's good. Is there somebody there that's not supposed to be there or whatever? That's all good for that side of things. But have that situational awareness of things that are just beautiful or different or amazing. If you see a bird, stop. Stop and give yourself that thing our hunter-gatherers had, right? If they saw a bird, if they saw movement in the woods, they keyed in on it instantly. they looked at it and went, oh, what is that? Maybe that's something I can eat. Maybe it's something that's dangerous to me. And that satisfied that need, that predatory need for them, even if it wasn't something to capture or kill, right? So we're not going to be stoning a freaking robin or a cardinal, but stopping and observing it and just thinking to yourself, that's a beautiful cardinal. Or maybe, you know what, that's a male, but he's not fully read out yet. It's a young of year bird. He was born this. Just those things in the mind and contemplation. If you see a lake and the sun's going down and it's got to stop. I'll tell you where I put this rule in my life. I used to work as a contractor for Lockheed Martin many years ago. We're talking early to mid 90s here. And it was a big campus. It was such a big campus that desktop phones, we had 2 prefixes just for the campus. So that meant there were more than 10,000 numbers of phones on the campus. Now, a lot of people had 2 or 3 different numbers for different reasons, but we had two different prefixes for phones. That's how big this campus was. And most people got there right around dawn. And because it was a huge parking lot on the one side, there was 2 buildings, and I was kind of, my headquarters was in one, and then the other one was where like coffee and donuts and shit like that were. So I used to get there early because I lived like 10 minutes away. And I'd go and get some coffee, and I'd stand in the window and I'd watch the sunrise. And nobody bothered me because, first of all, you're a contractor. People leave you alone as long as your projects get done. And second of all, there's nobody there yet. And one day I realized, you're so focused on this pretty sunrise every morning. It was my thing. It was my ritual that got me in the right frame of mind to do my job for 9 hours. That you've never actually paid attention to the people. So I started watching the people. And Texas has some gorgeous sunrises. And I watched these people park their cars, every single one of them, head down, looking at their, basically their pagers back then. It's so long ago. Or whatever shit was in their hands, whatever shit was in their head down and go straight into the building. And not one of them would stop and look up at that sky for half a second, like it would even matter. This was a good work environment, too. If you showed up to your desk, even if you had an overriding supervisor, like you were right, nobody said nothing if you were a couple minutes late. It wasn't like I got to get in before they kill me or fire me or something. It was just, that was the mind. There's no reason to look up. And I thought to myself, you know what? I'm always going to look up every day. Every day I'm going to pay attention to some of these things. I'm going to contemplate the flavor of something when I eat. I'm not just going to shove it in my mouth as fast as I can. I'm going to think about it. It's an interesting side effect. You start thinking about the flavors of what you're eating, you eat a lot less junk. And you get a lot more pleasure from eating less but better quality food. You don't have to go on a diet. You just go, gee, that McDonald's hamburger or whatever it is, and let that be a pseudonym for all of it, tastes like shit. Why did I eat that? I know it's not good for me, but if it was really good, well, then I would at least I sacrificed for a reason. You get better health habits. On that, eat well, love yourself, and love your family and your friends. Most people hate themselves. Most people, honest to God, hate themselves in the world today. You can't be useful to anybody else if you hate yourselves. Because self-preservation is seen as selfish today, and that's by design. That's part of the manipulation. That's a conflict for your mind. You take care of yourself, and by taking care of yourself, you're then able to take care of others. If you do something stupid and end up as a, quadriplegic and you're in a chair and you can't even wipe your own rear end, and it's because you did something stupid, but you were taking a risk for your family, have you helped them? That's an extreme example, but I use extreme examples as a teacher so that you'll understand. And how do you think the person that's a quadriplegic that had no say in the matter, that it was totally an accident, they had no role in fields looking at you knowing you gave up what they lost, but you did it because of stupidity. So you have to take care of yourself. You have to eat right, drink right, take care of yourself. And everything in media is designed to make sure you don't. Try to watch anything on modern TV without somebody shoving a donut, a coffee, and booze in their face in a 1-hour show. Right? I'm telling you, there'll be some junk food, there'll be some booze, right? And there'll be some coffee. And I drink coffee. I'm drinking coffee right now, but I don't live on it. Right? That's part of the agenda, is to get you to live a sick life. And drugs. Yeah, John's right. Drugs too. Drugs too. I think the hardest part maybe for many recovering alcoholics is just watching TV, because everybody's pouring a glass of scotch or a wine or whatever at the end of the day. And it's reality. It's what people do, but it's also like they know what they're doing. That it's not necessary to usually, advance the plot line, is it? Right. So that's an agenda. Next, realize what really matters. If you can't change it because of what you think and do, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Now, if it's something that may affect you, i.e., there might be a diesel fuel real shortage coming soon, then you can take an action to deal with the consequence. But you can write your senators. It's not going to help. You can be mad. You can post about it on social media. You can tell your brother-in-law for the 87th time who's not going to listen. Or you can see the part that you can control within the limits of what you have, and then you can go, done. I'm out. Quit. Not part of my life anymore. Yeah, that's how it works. If you want to have control of yourself, you have to shut off anything that doesn't really matter. And a lot of shit that affects you doesn't really matter. That's hard to understand. It affects you, but you can't change it. So the only thing that matters is the behavioral and structural changes you can make that alter it for you. And beyond that, you have to let go. And if you don't, it will take 30 minutes of mainstream programming, whether it's news or a sitcom, to manipulate you back into the macro move of the wave. So, next thing you need to do, understand your circles of concern and influence, and mainly your circle of control. So I know I kind of covered that, but I want to hit that as we move forward. Do I have the ability to act in this way for my best interest and therefore the best interest of my family and the people I love and take care of? Yes or no? No, out the door. Yes, you do that thing, out the door. And most people spend the majority of their mental energy focused on things that they have no control over. How big Kim Kardashian's ass is. What's going on 8 states over that doesn't affect you at all. Notice, for instance, right now, with the Roe v. Wade crap, the states with the biggest protest, the ones shrieking the loudest about wanting to be able to be pro-choice, have no risk whatsoever of that changing for them. The place with the loudest mouths, California. California will remain the same. It'll probably move more toward that side of the issue. But yet they're screaming, they're shrieking, they're yelling at people, they're throwing rocks at church windows and threatening people to go to church. They've lost their minds. They're lunatics. But it's because they're focused on things that they don't control anyway and that don't matter to them. They just believe that they matter. That's the most dangerous person in the world. You convince a person that something that doesn't actually affect them is going to affect them. You have total control. Because that person has gone all the way to the deep end of Bonhoeffer's theory of stupidity's pool. And no logic will ever reach them because they've already renounced it. They've already renounced it. And it's by design. And don't let anyone else tell you what you need to be concerned about. Don't let anybody else tell you what questions you need to be asking. If you find something not interesting, don't worry about it. Worry about the things you find interesting. Humans do what's in our best interest. We're wired to do that. That's why I believe in a free market, because if everybody does what's in their best interest without interference from others, as long as we don't harm people or take their stuff, then self-interest is actually what guides collective interest. It's completely backwards from what you're taught. There's a reason it doesn't work out well for people that want centralized control, to point out that individuals seeking what's best for them with very simple morals and ethics. I don't hurt anybody. I don't take their things, and otherwise I do what's best for me, will lead to a very ethical society, but a very decentralized one. They don't want that. So that's exactly whatever they don't want is what you do. Mostly, whatever they say, do the opposite, and you'll be okay. Now, if they say, look both ways before you cross the street, don't be spiteful to the point where you get run over like a frog. But otherwise, in the macro, that's what to do. Now, how do we analyze an issue? I have a 10-step process to analyze any issue. And it will take you less time to do it once you train your mind to do it than it will for me to, if I just read the bullet points and didn't even explain them. It'll take less time. It'll take seconds. But here's the basic process. 1, remove all emotional and psychological baggage. If you have an issue in front of you and you realize that some past experience or some cognitive bias has emotion coming up in you, I'm mad about this. I'm scared because of this. I am happy because of this. Any emotion that's leading your attention flow, divorce the emotion for now. I understand there's things that are absolutely enraging. I feel it too. But when I get enraged, like recently when I talked yesterday about the bill being passed in Australia that says you can't grow your own food and it's all bullshit. Well, my initial reaction, because so much has happened, was like, those bastards. And I went, whoop, there it is. Step 1, divorce the emotion. Because then I actually read the bill and found out it doesn't say that. And it's more hype from the freaking alternative media, which is really the hype media, which is the agenda-led media, the Mike Adamses of the world. And it's all bullshit. And all it took was step 1, removing the emotional psychological baggage. As soon as I did that, the first question became, is it true? No. Don't care. So I didn't even have to go to step 2. Step 2, though. Does this affect me? Does this affect me personally, myself, and the people I care about? Yes or no? Be honest. Many people, if you don't divorce the emotion, you will justify how it does, even if it doesn't. Well, they're going to do this thing over here. Does that actually affect you over here? No? Okay. That doesn't mean you stop. Because macro things can create waves that will eventually affect you. But let's at least be clear. This thing that I got all mad about does not actually have an effect on me in a direct way. At least you know that. Now we can even stay a little more emotionally divorced, or maybe we have to fight the emotion a little more because the answer is yes. So the answer is yes, it does. We really have to separate the emotion to be logical in how we're going to deal with it. Step 3, if number 2 is no, if when I say, does it affect me? No. Okay, now we're going to say, do I really care to know more? Now that I know it doesn't affect me, do I have intellectual curiosity about this at all? Be careful if the answer is yes. I'm not saying stop, just be careful. Use caution, because does it interest you because you're still hanging on to the emotion? You can have the emotion back at the end. I only want to get you through this process as a Vulcan. At the end, you're allowed to have your emotions come back. Don't be afraid to put them away. They're not gone. You picked your emotions up, put it in a box, stuck it on the shelf, complete the process. You can have your emotions back. Yeah? All right. So if you have a yes answer to this, though, proceed with caution anyway. Even if you don't feel that you are being emotionally, still be cautious. Whenever you give yourself the answer, yes, I want to know more about this, even though it doesn't affect me, you are in a position where you have the potential to be on a gerbil wheel for a very long time. Running your ass off. Where attention goes, energy flows. Okay? And you're putting all this energy into this thing that you've already determined doesn't affect you. And it's not necessarily bad, but what aren't you doing? If that attention was somewhere else, what would you be doing? And that includes just like I'm doing mindless work, collating papers and listening with my headphones at a reasonable volume in the office space, right? It's still your attention is there. Where could your attention be that's better suited? So be really freaking careful if it doesn't affect you and you still want to know more about it. 4, take the issue into an alternative context using substitution. This is something you have been specifically trained, not taught, trained. In other words, conditioned as an organism not to do. Let's take a look at the current situation with the Ukraine-Russia war. I've used this analogy to make a point. You to understand this without all the emotion and controls of the media and put up your little Ukrainian flag or whatever to virtue signal, you have to simply ask yourself, what if Central America and the northern part of South America was the equivalent of Russia, and they had a coalition? And it was called the Warsaw Pact, just like it was in Europe. Russia was just in South America. And they had like up to Panama as part of their Warsaw Pact. And then slowly over time, nations that were in between, Belize, Honduras, El Salvador, etc., Guatemala, began joining the Warsaw Pact and moving closer to our border. And then Mexico petitioned the Warsaw Pact for membership, and we already had kind of made an agreement that said, hey, you're not going to do this. And then they started putting a lot of weapons in Mexico and funding them to a high level and saying, hey, yeah, we're behind them joining us. How would you feel if you lived in America about that? That doesn't mean anybody's specifically right or wrong, but now the entire issue is different. You've done a substitution. And it could be, I think Mark's a jerk because of the way he spoke to me at work. Okay. Well, how'd you speak to Mark? Now ask yourself, what if Mark said what you said to Mark to you in the same context? How would you feel about it? It could be a little personal issue, or it can be a great big macro issue. But there is no way you have a logical view of a situation without a substitution test. And this is where you can solve so many problems for yourself. I just don't know what I should do with this thing. Personal, business, whatever. You say, my friend Bob, he brought this problem to me. What would I do? What would I advise Bob to do? It's probably what you should do. It's why we tell you in permaculture, never design your property first. Design some other people's property, even if they're not going to do it, even if they're not going to pay you. Just go take a look at their land and say, if I owned Bill's land, this is how I would design it. And you'd be like, oh, I would put my zone 2 food forest over here and my zone 1 here. And this is where I put my herb garden and put a little pond right there. And look at your property. You're like, oh, no, well, I'm special. You're not. You're just caught in it. The substitution test pulls you out. So you have to do that. That's step 4. Step 5, use logic to analyze this issue based on all your past knowledge and experience. Right? So you go to yourself first before you seek outside at all. Well, I'm going to look up what Snopes says, or I'm going to look up what, PolitiFact says, or whoever the right-wing fact checkers are, if there are any, says, or I'm going to look up what my favorite, commentator says. I'm going to look at what Jack says on this or whatever. First, determine you've gone through this. You've removed your emotional, psychological attachment. You've determined whether or not it affects you. You've determined that you care whether or not it does affect you. So we've gotten that far. So it's worth going forward. We've used alternative context. Now, what's your instinct? Where at this point are you headed with a personal decision about this thing, whether it's small or large? And trust that gut instinct. You're still going to check it, but trust it. It's usually right. When somebody says this politician said something that is completely ridiculous for a politician to say, even if they would mean it, it's probably not true. Politicians are actually really good at their job. That sounds crazy, but what is their job? Gaining and keeping power. So saying things that will cost them power generally isn't something they do, even if they're scum. So trust that gut. Okay. Now that we've done all that, now is information gathering. Step 6. Now, what most people do, they skip steps 1 through 5. Now, steps 1 through 5, in most instances, can happen in about 30 seconds once you become adept at it. Ever watch somebody do a thing? Like you get trained for a new job, and it's like a mechanical thing or something. You're like, I don't think I'll ever be able to do that fast. Those of you who are in the military, first time you ever watched a drill sergeant slowly take an M16 apart, or an M4 if you're younger than I am, right? And you watch them do it slow, and you're like, I can do that. And they put it back together. And then they're like, boom, 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 took it completely down, put it back together in 90 seconds. Down and back in 90 seconds. You thought, I'll never do it. I said, well, you got to do it in 2 minutes. You think, I'll never be able to do that. Next day, boom, 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 you're doing it. Once you train a skill, you can execute it almost immediately. You'll find yourself doing this intentionally all the time. And what will happen is a lot of shit, you're going to get to step 5, and you're going to say, I don't need to gather information about this. It doesn't affect me. I'm not really that interested in it. And I don't want to waste any more time that I could be like building my rabbit hutches, right? I saw Chris Vidal put out a thing on Facebook yesterday. It was great. It was like a little cartoon thing. There's a group of guys talking, and the one's like, hey, I could start raising some meat for the community. And then there's a guy over on the other side that's like, hey, did you hear about the leaked Supreme Court? And one of the dudes like grows huge and reaches over, puts his thumb up, and he goes back to his side. And they're like, yeah, and I could grow vegetables in the back. That's what I'm talking about. If you get to step 5 and it doesn't pass the test of being worthy of further pursuit, it is gone. It is dead. I got other shit to do. If it is worth going, now's information gathering. And again, let's say you skip, you're still emotional. You haven't determined whether or not it really affects you or if it's worth proceeding with, even if it doesn't. And you haven't used the substitution test and changed the context for a different perspective. And you haven't used logic to analyze and know and identify your cognitive bias, what you already think. And that cognitive bias hasn't been checked against the first 4 steps. You go gather information. What are you going to do? Be honest. You're going to do exactly what people do. And they know this when they want to control your mind. You're going to go seek out the information that concerns the gut feeling you had that you didn't develop through a logic system of checks and balances for yourself. That instant emotional reaction, you're going to go confirm it. You can confirm anything that you hear from the media. You can confirm anything you hear from your buddy online. I guarantee you, you will find a collection of sources that validate what you want to believe. That's why it's so critical to be aware that you want to believe it before you research it. I disagree with the mainstream that says it's critical that you don't do your own research. It's absolutely critical that you do your research. They know you're going to do your research. They know you can't give 350 million Americans access to Google or DuckDuckGo or Brave Search or whatever you use and have them. It's too much power. Of course you're going to do it. They'll say not to, but they know you're going to. They just want to steer how you do it. If they keep you in an emotional, unbalanced, illogical state focused on things that don't matter, you'll go exactly in the direction that you were going to go right from the get-go without any checks. They don't care what direction you go. They just want to move you. Left, right, left, right, left, right. The giant goes forward. The giant is not you. The giant is them. You have to get off the shoe of the giant. And you do this, so now we can gather the information. And the first thing we should do, since I have determined that I believe X and Y is the opposite of X, I should research Y first. I should first build a case against my bias that the other side is in fact right. And I should do the best I can to prove my gut wrong. And then after I do that, then I can go build the counter case. Most people will never do the opposite of what they believe, so they'll never build a counter case. Since I've only researched the thing I wanted to believe, and what I wanted to believe came out to be true because I confirmed it through cognitive bias, I have no need to look at the other side. You have to be able to get yourself mentally prepared if you were going to have a 10-minute organized debate with somebody. When you showed up to that debate, the guy running the debate would say, your position is X. I don't believe X. I don't care. You have to defend it anyway. If you can't do that, you have not done your research. You do not understand what the experts say, etc. You are an automaton believing a thing because you've chosen. And you have, in most instances, a 50-50 shot. You could be right. You could be wrong, but you don't know you're right. Being right, not knowing you're right, just believing you're right is actually sometimes worse than being wrong. Because if you're wrong, you will eventually run into reality as a wall. And it will give you feedback you will have to accept. If you're right, but don't know why you're right, you'd never hit the wall. So a lot of conclusions you draw from being right are bad. This is why people that start a company and their first company goes to the moon and everybody wants to be part of what they're doing. So everybody throws money at them for their second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth company. And they never succeed again. And nobody can understand why, because they succeeded in spite of themselves. I know people, I mean, multi-millionaire entrepreneurs, home run, company one, never built another successful enterprise, never built a successful enterprise a second time. False positives are bad. False positives are bad results. They leave you in the wrong directions. False correct positives can be worse. It might be a little hard to understand, but it does. So now we've gathered information. We think we've made a determination. Now, we're going to do something that's really hard for people to do. We are going to go back to step 1, and we're going to repeat step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 again, right? And then continue the process until we really feel comfortable with our decision on this issue. Because, well, that's a lot of work. Well, if you start feeling that way, maybe you really need to go back to step 2. Does this really affect me? If that's too much work, then maybe this issue isn't important as you've convinced yourself that it is. And a lot of issues that make it to step 6 will get kicked out to the trash can in step 7. You'll get that far, and then when you think, I really need to keep, I don't really know, you'll go, well, shit, right? Damn. I don't want to do any more. Well, is this really important? Either yes, it is, or no, it's not. And you'll find out how much isn't if you, and again, you'll be to step 7 in most instances in 10, 15 minutes. You'll be to step 5 in 30 to 45 seconds when you get good at it. It's only the research that takes time, clear-headed research. If it's important, there's plenty of material to find on it on both sides of the issue. Step 8. Explain your opinion to yourself. If not, explain your opinion to yourself and see if you really believe it. Use one of your alternate contexts when you do. If you want to explain, for instance, how the United States did not have any role in provoking Russia into conflict, then you should be able to explain the Mexico analogy and explain why the United States should not be aggressive toward Mexico and South America version of Russia. If you can't explain that, you really need to ask yourself if you really believe your own bullshit. Now, maybe you can. I'm not saying you can't. I'm not telling you what to think. I don't tell you what to think. I tell you how to think as a process. And then you get a result. And if you actually follow the process, I don't care what your result is. I know that you're more informed, and maybe I'm wrong if I disagree with you. And you know what can happen if we both do this process? We can have what's called a productive debate or productive conversation from different sides of the issue. If we have not both done this, we will not have a productive debate. And that's why you see so few productive debates. Step 9, form your opinion and determine what action you should take. Remember the IDGAF option. What is IDGAF? IDGAF. I'm going to put it up on the screen for you guys so you can think about it and maybe come to a conclusion. I'll tell you about the other part if we're not going to use the IDGAF option. You formed an opinion. And your opinion is, this is actually a thing that I need to worry about. Yep. And Tom got it right. I don't give a fuck. That's what the IDGAF option is. You have that option. You can get through all of this and go, in the end, I was wrong to spend this time. I'm not going to waste another second. I don't care. I'm going to go back to like building my garden or setting up my rabbit hutch or building my business, right? And that's fine. It's okay if you spend all this time, because then when somebody tries to sucker you into it, I did this already, right? Big thumb up. Good for you, buddy. Hey, and who can reload ammo in our group? Let's set somebody up as the reloader and start feeding them supplies, right? Whatever it is, right? Actually productive. Awesome. Absolutely. That's part of that option. But if it is important, determine only that which you can do and put the process of getting that thing done in place. So for instance, here's a macro level issue coming down to micro for us, but macro for us still, because it was a whole company that we saw coming and what we did about it. So back around the time I started Survival Podcast in around 2008, so back in 2007, actually, I was working with a very well-known British entrepreneur named Neil Franklin. He was a partner in a business, several businesses with me. And we had, one of our businesses was a contract recruiting corporation. We had 1,200 contractors all around the world doing telecommunications and technology work. We had people anywhere from, in Texas, right where we were, to Sri Lanka or Malaysia or the Philippines. And we had a whole group of people that were paid very well to fill those positions. They were supposed to be finding new places to place people, and then finding new people to place. And the way we trained them was, you don't just get a job off the job board, match it to a candidate that works for us, put it together. That's your layup. We expect you to do that with your eyes closed in 4 hours a day and fill all your orders. The other 4 hours should be spent finding great candidates and then finding opportunities, including company doesn't even know they need this person. That way you can open the door and we can grow our business. Some people did it the way they were trained, and most people just filled orders. Well, Neil came into the boardroom and he said, 1 year from today, this is how I knew, by the way, when I started TSP. 1 year from today, this country, and the world as a whole is going to realize that they are in a recession. And 6 months after that, the shit is really going to hit the fan. And since we put people to work, it is going to hit unduly with us unless we go into growth mode in advance. So we identified all the recruiters that were weak. We put them through intensive boot camps. We had 4 of those. 3 washed. Only 1 remained. 3 washed out. But we sailed through the recession. We cut the dead weight. We made one of them into a superstar. And the company grew during a recession because that was what we could do. Now, if we threw our hands up and said, oh, shit, we just need to lay people off, what would have happened? Because what happened was our stars that were already stars were like, you know what? It's about time they cut that dead wood. And when we cut the dead wood, there was more just layup placements for everybody that was doing the right kind of work. So morale went up, work ethic went up, and people also thought, shit, if I don't get it done, they really are going to get rid of me. That was the action we could take. So is it that big for you? Maybe, maybe not. What can you do about the fact that we're probably going to have major diesel fuel shortages coming up? The shit you need to get through summer and into fall, get it now. If you can. If you can't, think about how you can stage bringing it in over time. What's the most important? What's most likely to be affected? Do that first. So that's step 9. And then step 10, the most important one and the one that requires humility. Remember, no matter how convinced you are, you could still be wrong. And again, if you train your mind into this process, except for the research phase, this is a 1 to 2 minute process. And anybody that says, I don't have time for that, then the issue is not important enough to put through the process. And that's what I want you to see, because you'll have this reject program function that will become very attuned. Did you hear? Nice. Good luck. I'm going on to this other thing. And you'll be blown away. The reason I said I wanted to do something practical today, and then I chose this is the most practical advice I can give you in the current state and time that we're in society. We're going through what will be our Great Depression. It may not look anything like the Great Depression we think of, but it is the testing of the souls of men for us. Pretty much everybody that was really tested by the Great Depression is dead or in total IDGAF mode, right? They're in total, like, if you're 90 anything, your give a fuck meter could not be pegged more to 0. There, as you age, there's more and more stuff you just let go of. And there's a point where you're like, you know, I'm 94. I'm still here. I can still get up and pee in the toilet by myself. I'm good. But grandpa, you're drinking bourbon. Damn straight. Well, it could kill you. I'm going to die. Like, you get to that mode. That's a natural state for humans to get to, right? We need to get to that state as quickly as possible with any issue that doesn't affect us or we can't do anything about. We need to be like that old man with any issue that really is that. Now, I'm not saying everything the old man writes off, you don't need to write off, or you need to write off, right? Because there is a point where you kind of go over the hill because, hey, I'm over the hill. But there, you've got to get into that state. And what my point with that is it is normal, not that every generation, but every group of generations, kind of in a macro bubble. So what we're talking about here is boomers through Gen Y, right? Or Gen Z or whatever the hell they're calling them. So my grandkids all the way back to my dad. it is normal for that bubble of 3 or 4 or 5 generations to be morally, emotionally, physically tested. Like, in other words, every human will experience this, but they will not experience it at the same age. They'll be young, prime of life, middle-aged, old. And this is the 4 turnings. This is what some people call it, but we need this. We need this because when it hits us in the face, we need the guiding hand of the graybeard. We need the experienced but still active middle-aged person. We need the young, energetic person who can look at it in a totally new light that us old farts have written off. And we need the kids to take it forward and convert the ideas of the young generation into actual solutions. We have to have the 4 generations all with fresh eyes on seeing it really happen. We can read history and all, but really being part of it for the first time. You listen to these old folks, that the few that are still around. I was around during the Great Depression. They were 5 or 6 years old. They're kind of the lost piece. They really don't have full recollection of it, and they don't have enough influence to really help now. It's sad, but that's what happens to most people as they get into that really advanced age state. But it's the people who are still taking a role in society. We need to hear from all of them because it's our goal now, understanding we are in that 4th turning. We want Gen Z to be the strong men. If we skip a rotation in that 4th turning, it's Gen Z's children. And you and I, guys, all the people are my age and you older millennials, if Gen Z is not the strong men, if they're the weak men, they're going to be the ones when we're sitting in old folks' homes deciding what happens to us. So it's our own best interest not to let that happen. And we can turn a 4th into a 5th turning. And a 5th turning puts an extra lag in recovery. And I believe that is the goal. Can't we just look to the boomers? I don't know about that, man. Like, we have to look to everybody. Because this is the reality. This is part of why farming is in trouble. Average age of a farmer, 7 years ago, Joel Salatin said at a thing I was at, 66 years of age. Average age of a farmer 7 years ago, 66. When you're 66 and somebody says, here's a new way to do things, you're like, I ain't got no time for that. Even if it sounds like a good idea, you're like, I got a farm to run, dude. I'm old. I'm going to retire in 10 years and sell my farm. I ain't got time for that. You know who uses the latest information? The youngest entry into an environment. That's why there's podcasts out there that are way more technologically advanced than me, even though I'm an OG podcaster, right? I'm an original gangster podcaster. I'm one of the first. That's why there's over 3,000 episodes. But I'm having to learn, counter to my instincts, to use new technologies like StreamYard. This is what mental sovereignty brings, though. To be the older person who can still adapt to and use the new thing. With that, let's go ahead and hit a few of your questions here. So... questions and comments. K-Bonk says every COVID swab could have been DNA harvesting. Yeah, I don't think so. I think that goes in the conspiracy theory realm, especially since so much of the testing was done if you get into like the mid stage of the scamdemic, most of the testing was done in doctors' offices with rapid tests. And I can tell you what happens in those doctor offices with the rapid test kit. They get a result, they put it in a bag, and they throw it into hazardous waste, and it goes and gets incinerated or something. And so it's not that I don't think they would do it. It's that it's not really a very practical thing. Now, the hospital-level PCR tests, yeah, that could have happened. But why do that when people will voluntarily submit their DNA to a company? You can just buy the whole company, and it's all recorded, and you have their ancestry and their genealogy. See, like, always use Occam's razor too, right? What's the simplest way to get to the goal? That's probably what they're going to do. Scott says, and they're crashing everything. Yes, they are, and they're buying everything. Do what you will with that information. I haven't brought it up because I said we're not going to talk about Bitcoin today, but yeah, you crash a thing and then you buy it. And just think about if you had unlimited access to credit to buy as much of anything as you want, how much would you literally get on your knees and pray to God, God, please crash XYZ market? Because I can own it. Whatever they crash, they buy. Matthew says the spot market for freight is down as well. Rates paid to trucks on the spot market for companies with 1 to 5. That's area I don't know a lot about, won't pretend to, but what it sounds like is just the general price that a trucker is given to move a given load from A to B is down. Like I would think of it in my old world as a contract, the baseline contract labor rate is what we would call it. Like a level 3 technician is going to cost us $85 an hour and we can bill $125. I think that's kind of what he's talking. So the truckers paid less, bearing more of the burden of the cost of transport, right? And when people say, but the company is the one paying for the gas, there's no independent truckers left or whatever, that's true, but the gas cost still goes into your wage cost for me as your employer. That's something people have a hard time understanding. Green Country Acre says it's not as expensive to buy a vote as one might think. Most large corporations can do it, but we can't. Vote buying is actually really cheap if you focus on buying the right votes. So you have to realize the votes you're going to buy. You're going to buy a piece of the 20% we call the mushy middle when it comes to vote buying of the public. So of people that vote, you have about a 40%, and it's actually moved up now. There's more tribalism. So this is actually good for them, by the way. The political tribalism has moved up to more close to 45, and that might be 44 Republican, 46 Democrat. But those people, if they vote, they're going to vote. I don't care if they say they're independents. They're not. I have people all the time. I'm an independent. Who'd you vote for last time? I voted for the R. Tell me the last time you voted for a D. They don't have an answer. They go away. So true independents, people that swing their votes, about 10%. How much of the 10% do I have to buy in an even split to influence an election? The answer is 6% of the total. Roughly 51, 52% of the split. It's not that many people. Not when you have billions or trillions of dollars to do it with. And what if you can have the media help you by pushing a lot of that middle already to your side and only have to buy a couple more to put it over the top? Then maybe you hire a few people to stuff a few ballot boxes and hey, you got what you want, whatever. Camel Burton says, always seek source documents and read them. Yeah, especially when they say, this bill says this horrible thing that's unbelievable. Read the bill. I know it's hard to read the bill. If the bill's 1,500 pages, there's enough bad in it to oppose it. But a lot of these bills that people say, it's going to do this or it's going to do that, they're 8-9 pages long. Read it. Read it and see if that's in there. Like, I have found so many things. This bill is going to do this, and the bill's not even about the thing. That one in Australia is a perfect example. It's going to outlaw growing your own food. Well, it's about moving around dirt that has no noxious weeds or pathogens in it and invasive species pest animals. I'm sorry. It might be a bad bill, but it doesn't do the thing you claim, because I read the actual bill. Read the source document. You sit on a throne of lies. Just kidding. LOL from Don Ricardo. Many people do sit on thrones of lies. That's Zen, he says as well. Humble Mechanic says, jump in talking about drifting. LOL, not that drifting, Charles. I'm not sure what that was. That must have been something that wasn't really for me. Green Country Agroforestry says, I like to think of natural human behavior as a complex adaptive system. The rules that the individual will follow, pursuing self-interest, if allowed to, create a functioning society, and it's beautiful. And why wouldn't they be? If humans were left to our natural state and not controlled, why wouldn't we be functional? What else isn't functional in nature? What else doesn't run into natural limitations that form a check on them? It is our ability to artificially lift temporarily our natural limitations and then to use psychopathy to control individuals that put us out of balance and allow us to not be a complex, adaptive, beautiful system. In nature, the lion kills the gazelle, but the gazelle doesn't go extinct because the lion kills it. The elephant eats massive amounts of vegetation, but if we don't disrupt natural migration flows, we don't disrupt predatory relationships, etc., the elephant doesn't deforest Africa. We deforest Africa through the elephant and then blame the elephant. Green country agroforestry is completely right, in my opinion, about that. Jack, tastes great, less filling, the pros and cons of decisions. Both of them lead you to the same decision, right? That's actually a really great point, Ecomouse says for us. So if I give you the choice, hey, I want to drink Miller Lite because it tastes great, and I give you the choice, I want to drink it because it's less filling. I don't care. Just drink my shitty beer. That's how it works, guys. And that's most things in the media today. Let's see. Jim Jen says, if I put 10K into Bitcoin, do you think it'll be safer than what's in the stock market or the bank? I know it's a dumb question, but I'm not very good with this. I don't know. What stock market? NASDAQ or Dow Jones? What index? Are you going to go into Dow and then go into mid-cap and growth stocks? Are you going to go into a sector that we know will recover? I don't know. What is safer? What does safer mean? Does it mean you have less chance of losing money over 6 months? Or does it mean you have less chance of losing money over 10 years? Or does it mean you'll have less chance of gaining money over 10 years? Which one's going to pay off better? What do you mean when you ask that question? I don't give this advice. I'll just tell you that I'm buying Bitcoin every day during this drop. And I'm not going all in because I want some dry powder to use. I want to be able to back the truck up at some point. Did we bottom? I don't know. My gut is not yet. I don't know. Did the stock market bottom? No. No, it didn't. When you're making decisions with large amounts of money about investments, just remember, don't let FOMO push you into putting all the chips in at once. $10,000 divides up really nicely into $1,000 increments. And then, you can start making decisions. And then maybe you say, well, I actually think there's some really good buys in the stock market right now. Like this stock, its PE ratio is great. It looks undervalued. I'm going to buy $1,000 of that. And I'm going to buy $1,000 of Bitcoin. And I'm going to wait with my other $8,000. And yes, inflation's eating your $8,000. But what did we teach you about that? What is inflation? It is the least price you pay for opportunity of capital cost. If I lose 2% on my $8,000 this month, but I now have that $8,000 available as a capital opportunity next month, I just paid 2% for the ability to maintain the opportunity. Charles says, drifting cars, you were talking about drifting mentally. Yeah. I'm not a big car drifter guy. Serrano says, don't forget TV programming isn't just the news, drama, sitcoms, etc. Yeah, we covered that, dude. I think maybe you came in a little bit later. I said that everything on TV comes with the goal of ratings, emotional reaction, and selling an agenda. Like if you want it, like where you can really see it is older, like sitcoms and dramas. And then you go into the context of the time. Go watch like the first couple seasons of the TV show 24, which came on right after 9/11 and, creation of the Department of Homeland Security. And they created this fictitious agency called CTU, Counterterrorism Unit. And then Jack Bauer's going to go get them all. And if you watched it back then, it was really easy to go into the fantasy completely. If you watch it now, you're like, I see what you were doing, right? K-Bonk says best investment advice. I think he's talking about what I just said. Don Ricardo says, are crypto mining apps and browser tabs any good or just dedicated equipment? You are not going to mine shit in the crypto space with an app. It's a gimmick, because if I can get 100,000 people using my app and I can take 10% of what they do collectively and I have zero real cost, it benefits me, even though none of them will ever make money. And all we're doing is drawing down our devices and drawing down power. It will never pay for itself. Any of the crypto worth mining today, you're in the world of the ASIC, right? You're in the world of the $10,000 and up piece of equipment. And without that, you're personally not getting anywhere. I'm not saying there aren't some things you can still mine with GPUs and all. And if you can do it and make enough money on the shitcoin and dump the shitcoin and buy the Bitcoin, that's fine. That's profitable. But whatever you can successfully mine with GPUs today, you probably shouldn't be hodling. That's, again, my opinion. You can use the process I gave you today to tell me I'm wrong and tell me to stick it in my ass. And maybe you're right. And then one more from Don Ricardo. It's the same question repeated because he had a misspelling, but I understood. So I'm going to wrap up there. 124 today instead of almost 3 hours. I appreciate you guys. Again, the audio version of this show, if you want to listen to it again, and I have a feeling this would be a good one for some of y'all to listen to again, will come out tomorrow. If you go pick up the audio of the show today that's on the survivalpodcast.com, it will be the second half of yesterday's live stream. With that, guys, I really enjoyed being with you today. I will catch you later.